Oh man, I was just in the back room with Mike. We just got rudely entered into a webinar. Hey Mike, how's it going?
Hey, how are we doing?
Pretty good. All right, let me share my screen because I like when people look at our faces, but then if it's only our faces, people go like, "No, I don't want to watch this." I'm already deviating. I'm hijacking our own webinar to go to four cases. You got one more case. That's pretty good. About Service AI. You're here hopefully to watch specifically what we're kind of loosely saying how to transform your service desk from the inside. My name is Ricky Cecchini. My where's that? My title, depending on where you're seeing it. I'm the VP of Product at CloudRadial, so I work with the development team and then with a lot of MSPs to develop, discuss, kind of figure out the best path forward for CloudRadial products. This one being Service AI, and with me is Mike Parfitt. I feel like that's the right way.
You
I don't
got
think
it. Yeah.
either way.
Never used the surname before, Ricky.
And I realized I was like, it's the first time I've not been like, "Hey, Mike." Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself, and I'll tell you, guys, why we picked Mike, and hopefully he sticks around for the whole webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky. I'm Mike Parfitt. I'm the founder and CEO of an MSP based here in the UK called Team Metalogic. We've been around for about 22 years now, so kind of being an MSP before MSP was a thing, but always worked in that sort of model where it's retainer-based strategic advice to our partners, never break fix or anything like that. But yeah, I think the key for us has always been how we lead innovation, how we put ourselves at the forefront of forward thinking and getting the right tech in front of the right people at the right time. But great to
Beautiful.
be here today. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'll clarify everybody for everybody what we're doing specifically. So we're going to talk about a couple of the different use cases of Service AI with not a lot of PowerPoint. We're going to go straight into Service AI, and I think Mike is arguably the best person to have on this webinar because Mike was not only was he the first Service AI purchase, so he's the literal pioneer of setting it up. But I think one of the things that I want to talk about is addressing everybody else who may not be a pioneer, who's trying to figure out, when the right time to jump in on this, what the pros, the cons, the realism. So we're not just approaching this in a way that we're saying, go forth and start doing this tomorrow. I would love if you did, but being really cognizant of like what you want to look out for, why you're building towards it rather than just a lot of hype. So with that being said, let me catch you guys up and then we'll get straight to the meat. If you're not super sure what Service AI is or what we're talking about, it's a product created by CloudRadial. CloudRadial is, generally speaking, I'll summarize it, that we're a client-facing company. We really try to help MSPs kind of put the pen to paper with clients. So trying to improve service delivery, trying to make the clients happier. So our primary product is the portal, which is UCP, but that's like the interface. We have a chat product. Today we're talking about Service AI, and Service AI is specifically built to start kind of at the level where a lot of interactions begin, which is the service desk. And instead of just saying like, hey, we want to improve, some structure or we want to improve the titling, I think our real focus with Service AI is to try to holistically measure the desk with scores that you'll see in a moment, customize those to fit kind of the way you prefer to run your desk, and then kind of talk about the integrity of the data and how it speaks to and how it helps you achieve some kind of automation goals. And that automation is used very loosely because that could be anything from assisting a technician or scrounging up some documentation. Again, we'll get to those use cases, but I think I'll start the conversation here going right off the bat. This is not a tool, nor do I see many tools that are capable of replacing AI. I know that's a huge fear. Mike and I discussed even before this, but this is a tool that really is meant to augment and meant to help you find some holes. So if you're looking to replace AI, replace a human with AI, not this one. Sorry, not the place. We'll touch on that a little bit later. So what specifically are we covering and why did I throw a bonus fourth in there? We're going to talk about the stuff that Mike, myself, and several other MSPs have experienced, which is what an AI tool is very good at and what it can be better at and where we see it going. And the three that we started this webinar uh, wanting to cover is messy ticket data. Really what that means is the quality of the notes, the client-facing presentation, just understanding basically what you're putting out there as far as conversations with end users, the lacking documentation, More specifically, we're talking about the documentation that provides kind of guide rails for technicians to use. So again, if it's shoddy, if it's kind of incomplete, what ramifications does that have? How do you know if it's shoddy and incomplete? How do you know if it's usable? And again, how does that affect AI training? Inefficiencies, of course, which are kind of more strategic, basically saying like, if you measure the desk and you understand what's going on with it, can you uncover trends, patterns, insights? And that's something that we'll talk about as well, because a lot of MSPs are discovering that they don't really have time to go sorting through thousands of tickets. And one of the strengths of AI is pattern recognition across huge data sets. So how does that work? And then the fourth is what we call agent performance reviews, are basically just keeping tabs on technicians inside of your own organization and basically using this not as a hammer, but as a way to actually figure out who needs assistance. How can you, empirically find out who needs assistance, who's doing the right stuff, who needs coaching if they need correction? How do you go about that in a way that scales? So Mike and I are going to go through, it'll be my demo tenant. Unfortunately, I can't spill all of Mike's juicy help desk secrets. Sorry. But we can talk about real use cases and have a screenshot or two to show that shows some real examples. And then real quick, I'll just cover the model because sometimes people really want to understand how it's working. So the gist is that ServiceAI, again, is this platform that is not autonomous. It's really meant to bolt on to your ticketing system, your PSA system. And the primary ones that I've been working with are ConnectWise and Autotask. Synchro, Halo, and Kaseya BMS are like the five. We also just recently started supporting Zendesk for this. But the gist is that to get this kind of holistic understanding of the state of the service desk, it's not just the tickets, it's not just the technicians. We're kind of imbibing the tickets, the articles, the documentation, any additional rules, and then what we're doing is we're spitting out insights, which we're going to talk about, and we're also measuring and testing those. So basically the functionality of this tool as a whole is to sandbox and test and see how things work before you deploy it to clients, before you have technicians just, auto answering and taking AI on blind faith, and then the potential to put that in front of clients as a strategy as well. And we're not going to focus so much on that because I want to focus on what you can do today and how it's kind of helping desks today versus the future. And the future for a lot of MSPs is AI bots that, answer people perfectly. They provide documentation, they troubleshoot, they close tickets. And the reality is that's not today. Like basically every tool I've seen, if that is today, is a ton of work. So we're going to talk about what this can tangibly do for your desk today. And like what Mike was saying, what does it mean to be an early adopter? What does it mean to actually understand what's possible and where you take it from here and how do you kind of understand where to go from there? So last bit, and then we'll get into it. The general idea of this path to AI that we see, at least inside of ServiceAI, is that first phase of analysis, trying to understand where you are. Again, understanding the limitations and the positives of AI for what they actually are. Moving on to the testing phase where we try to improve the AI and improve our own internal documentation to make responses better, to make coaching better. And then eventually with the carrot on the stick being the deployment, right? So again, the way you end up using all of that beautiful help desk structuring that you've done to speak to tangible results. This is the path we generally see. I know it says Service AI, but I think it's fair to say this is an AI approach in general. And I'll pull my Mike card for right now as well. Mike has been talking, I think, a lot to his own team about AI deployment, as I know a lot of MSPs have. Is this something you see yourself? I mean, like when you talk about AI deployment, what are the hopes for you short term versus long term?
Yeah, I think the short-term hope so that you make the right choices and that you get it right, that the AI is delivering value to you as a business, or particularly in the area of the business that you want to get that return on investment or that value back.
Right.
And I think like we've got long-term goals with this, and it does go down the chat AI route, and it is about how we augment engineers by taking some of that repetitive stuff away from them. But certainly the short-term goals for us with this are what can we measure, and then what can we learn from what we measure. And like you said, pattern analysis, what AI is really good at, is helping us to sift through lots of data. And as you know, like we've pulled in a couple of years worth of tickets, and that's nearly 30,000 tickets that we're now using as a measure, and it's all relevant data to us. It's the last couple of years worth of ticket volume. It's a good few thousand articles that are coming in, and when we can actually measure how good our data is in our own systems, I think that's an invaluable resource, even beyond the boundaries of AI. But for us as a business, what are we putting into our systems? What data are we actually dealing with? And I think at the end of the day, anything that you discuss about AI is also a conversation about data.
Yes.
And those two things are kind of going really hand in hand for us.
I think that's the other thing, in our own almost handcuffs, is that as we've discovered, you and I, but a lot of people have discovered, there is much more, well, not much more, but there's a lot of interest beyond the AI stuff of just the structuring that you'll end up seeing value in, and coincidentally there's AI behind it, but we'll get to that as well. Last but not least, before we dive into the actual screen share and we talk about the use cases of it, if you at any point get a feeling that you might want to take a further look at this, you can always get a demo from radials.io/demo. I believe that we have account managers, if you're an existing client, in the comments as well. So if you have any questions, feel free, or they'll reach out to you. And then last but not least, I think we'll probably have time for a Q&A. Again, this is not going to be a super structured webinar because I never do those. But we're generally going to look at the specific use cases of these things inside of ServiceAI and kind of using Mike's literal experience to try to figure out how this kind of pen meets paper. So let's start with the messy ticket data to Mike's point. Now, again, this is not so much a webinar to talk about a full demo of ServiceAI, but we're going to talk about those specific use cases. And one of the things that we found is that in vendor hopeful land, you have the idea that, like Mike was saying, 30,000 tickets has a lot of valuable data. And one of the ways that we jumpstart the value of AI is by building that model, right? The LLM, large language model, and we kind of index all of the tickets that you have. And this is what a lot of AI tools do, with the purpose of being jump-starting knowledge, so you're not starting from scratch where you don't know any processes or you're having to Google common things. This goes from anything from how do I fix a common issue that maybe is readily available on the internet, all the way down to what is the specific process to handle a specific request from a specific client. That nugget of information is somewhere likely inside of your ticketing system, and that's what we're talking about getting. So even from a data structure perspective, as we cover this briefly, like what Mike and I discussed even on our own onboarding, is how much data is valuable. And that's one of the first questions that a lot of people ask. And even when we had our discussion, one of the first things that people say is they want a lot of data, understandably, but not too much, because I think that when we look at how this works realistically, it's almost like a human being, where you wouldn't necessarily chuck a human being at 5-year-old tickets to learn, which is the same thing as AI. So I think even dialing that in, and I think, like we said, Mike, I don't know how old your processes are, but I would think that after 2 years, maybe 3 years, that really kind of loses value on it. I mean, agree, disagree? What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, completely. And I think if we, again, as a business that I think tries to lead innovation, we've been working with a partner base that is largely cloud-based infrastructure as a service, etc., for 5+ years now.
Right.
And so certainly over that period of time for us, all of those tickets tend to be around 365, Azure, AVD, etc., those sorts of technologies and how we're working. But if we went even before that, and we're looking at on-prem servers and stuff, that data is going to be kind of irrelevant now. But even in the last 5 years, how we're delivering the likes of virtual desktop and environments, and how we're delivering 365 tenants and the technologies that we're using inside of those, that's changed dramatically. And yeah, I think, if we were still doing the same thing today that we did a year ago, we'd be stagnant as a business. So yeah, you've got to definitely for us, it's about making sure that we're looking at relevant data, which goes back to that data point again, doesn't it? But
it really does. I mean, and really that's the theme of this whole webinar, honestly, besides just like ServiceAI. It's really like we talked about garbage in, garbage out. And this is not, well, actually, we'll see it. There are ways to improve that, but there's no magical tool, I think, that AI can magically jump in there and figure everything out. And if you feed it bad things, you're building an infrastructure. That's what this really is. So I'll show you what the idealized version is versus what's more realistic and how we go from there. So again, first point is MSPs are discovering messy ticket data that you've probably known is there. Now, again, this tenant that we're in right now that I'm sharing is connected to ConnectWise as a ticketing system, and the tickets inside of it are largely false. They're ones that we've generated with AI to show an example of how it can get it. And even the prompt that we used to generate those tickets was like, have some of them be gruff and poor quality, some of them be exceptionally well documented notes. So if I pick like, I don't know, I'll just pick a random one. What we are ultimately seeing is that the service AI is grabbing that ticket and looking at it and scoring it in more or less three scores that we repeat throughout. And the three scores, I'll mention this, and they may pop up, further in the webinar, are the ticket RPS, which is a literal score of 1 to 10 of about how good the quality of notes is. And this is one of the first things that I see a lot of interest with a lot of MSPs is that it's really hard to empirically understand the quality of note taking from a technician unless you are literally reviewing it all the time and basing it yourself, which is tedious. So one of the fortes of AI that it is pretty good at is to be able to rank a ticket based off of, again, its own automation ability. Can I understand it? And even with the first couple meetings that Mike and I had, one of the things that was apparent to us is that it's almost too much AI, because the reality is that even though it says automation ability, it's also your fellow human being ability. If another technician jumped in on this and the notes were awful, a human being couldn't parse this any better than an AI could, right? That's one of the first things that we see. And again, the gist is this is how good the quality of the notes are to learn, to train from. The requester is basically the satisfaction, the sentiment of the user. And then the agent is our catch-all term for technician, right? So basically, how well did the technician go? And then you're going to see this be a pretty good score because, again, this is an AI-generated conversation where our theoretical user, Wanda, was relatively straightforward in her issue. Wanda and John, our technician, went back and forth and answered, and that's how it arrived at, how can I repeat this issue? Can I understand what happened and everything there? But the reality is that you wish tickets look like this, like all the time, and that's just not true. In fact, short of blowing anybody up, I will not be named. This is most of the time what I see in an actual ticket is I see a lot of tickets that have stuff like this, right? So Jamie put in a note saying fixed printer. And you're like,
and did that come from our tenant? It's possible. It's very possible.
I can't say whether it chose to pick on you because you signed up for the webinar with me, but for the most part, it's things like this that are commonplace, right? So I think when you even think about how to approach it, one of the nice things about Service AI is like, hey, yes, we have discovered that this is happening, and then you have to take remediation steps to fix that, which some of which you can do in here. But this is the first thing to kind of introspectively look at when you look at implementing a system and thinking like, is this going to save us? The reality is that like, if this is the current status quo of what's allowed, what's acceptable, whatever, it's not impossible, but it devalues a lot of the training data that you have. It doesn't really do much of a shortcut. So I think like, again, we'll take it to conversation mode, but like, if you were advising somebody else on, going through AI and thinking about it, Mike, is this something that you've talked about yourself? Like well before Service AI, was there a conversation on the integrity of it?
Absolutely. And even for us, when you employ somebody new, I think in managed services, it's quite a unique thing where somebody can come from another managed services provider with 2-3 years experience and then sit in our MSP, and all of a sudden the nuances of how we do things are different. And there's 100 ways to skin a cat is the phrase, isn't it? But and it is that. No, everyone's got a slightly different best practice. And you kind of rely on being taught on the job a lot of these things, and not the technical skills, but the delivery and the adaptation of those technical skills. And I think the one that I've seen for years that is my big bugbear is the notes on a ticket being issue resolved closing ticket.
Yeah.
And there's not even an internal note on there. But then, sometimes you get those little problems that come up that have just been inside somebody's head, and they've done the fix 10 times. So on the 10th time, they just type issue resolved closing ticket. I mean, the argument there would be stop the issue coming back. I know, but
We'll get there.
in realistic terms, that new engineer might be looking back at ticket histories to say, well, what have we done with this before? And it gives you nothing. So absolutely understanding that we are. And look, my big phrase here is if you didn't document it, it never happened. And these things very often, my acronym is the CYAs. It stands for cover your something else that I won't say, but it's you might get something that comes back in 6 months' time, and you absolutely rely on the auditability of that ticket to be able to say yes or no to a question that's now being asked. And you've got poor notes. You've got an engineer that is either yes being lazy and cutting corners, or is just being super efficient to move on to the next thing because to them it's so basic and primitive.
Yeah.
But neither of those situations actually help you from a data perspective. So
No, 100%. And that's kind of the thing that I want to be clear too. When we're talking about Service AI, this is not some fully minted, here's how it works and here's how we expect it to work. Part of the reason that we have these conversations, that we're having these webinars, is this is what we've discovered so far. This is what we need to uncover to assist in whatever, because Mike's right. Again, if you take the AI out of it, that ticket I showed you earlier of just fixed printer doesn't help anybody. So like one of the approaches that we do, and this is both a way to visualize how this helps, is you've kind of got two different brains, right? When Mike and I discuss Service AI, we're usually inside of the product here, inside of the software. And what it's doing is, again, that structuring of the messy data is like, yes, you can spot check tickets, but there are ways to do that more holistically, right? So when I go to that dashboard and we were talking about the scores, to be able to visualize the general scores of how that quality is, right? To figure out if you have to fix that problem before you can tackle it, right? You really don't want to turn on AI public facing if your note quality is terrible, because the AI is going to suggest that you restart printer for every printer issue because you've given it no context. It's not magic. And when we look at what it can do, and this is to assist in coaching, which is a really, really common thing that's coming up. Like Mike said, I've run into this with every MSP so far. You've got the text, the better they get, the more they know, and the more they know, the less they have time to to document it because they're busy and they can handle more. So like what it ends up happening, this is an example inside of ConnectWise, is that like by even using our pods, right? And this is something we're working on. I'll use that same ticket, I think. I think that was a fairly decent ticket, or actually I can use anyone, doesn't really matter. What's happening is as we open up a ticket inside of our PSAs, we want the experience to be that, obviously the technician can answer it and that's totally okay, but to have that answer be, helped jogged along with them to say like, okay, here's what you might want to reply. The answer itself is being synthesized and summarized from past things. It could be the web, it could be documentation, it could be ticket history, a blend of those, and it'll actually break down where it pulled those things from. But the reason to show this is that you almost have two different experiences, right? You have people in the field doing the work that just need a quick assistance, a quick double check. And where we see the most value, where I'm seeing the most value, is not necessarily in the senior technicians, but in the juniors, the ones that are starting, that need the documentation, that need the assistance, that need the protocols. And there are ways to tweak this that we don't need to get into for the webinar. But the point is, to have that be something that they can use instantly and say like, yes, I will use that and I'll paste that and try that first, making tweaks of their own for tonal checks and whatever, is a big head start over fixed or just crawling through a bunch of other tickets. To even be able to jump to other tickets to review them might be very helpful to them, right? So when we talk about that messy ticket data and how we uncover it, it's really a game of trying to uncover the symptoms. Are people putting in poor notes because they don't have any other notes to put in? Or are they putting in notes because they're cutting corners? Or are they cutting corners because they're overwhelmed? These are the questions that you start to get into, but only when you can really get a full picture of the data. Which brings us into point number 2, right? So we have ways to kind of take a temperature check of the quality of stuff. The next thing that comes into it is documentation. And documentation is a huge one for every MSP I've got. How would you have rated your own documentation? Like before AI even looked at it, would you have said you were pretty good, Mike? What's your thoughts?
yeah, I mean, I'm going to say far from perfect because it's always one of those ones that is always a conversation topic. But certainly, yeah, I think and I'll probably speak for a lot of MSPs when I say this, but I think the intention is always strong to start.
Yeah,
So you onboard a new customer, we're going out, we're turning over all of those rocks, we're taking photographs, we're documenting everything that we see. We want to give a brilliant handover to the whole of our service desk to say, when we start working with this customer, everyone knows where we are.
right.
But then we do things and change management happens and things get changed and configurations get adjusted. And whilst it might be in the ticket, is it also then replicated in documentation? And the answer is really always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. So again, even when we have these conversations separate from the AI tool, I always kind of get that temperature check because yes, the majority of answers can come from tickets, but obviously again, if you have a really good system of documentation, mixing that in and having that be just as strong of a base to pull from for answers is important. And then one of the things that we've noticed as well, and honestly, Mike, you're no different, is that documentation I wish existed in one place, but it doesn't. You've got multiple sources of areas where it exists, and I think that there's not really a, even from a vendor use case, right? If you're a documentation vendor, which we aren't, but I see the case of saying, please use ours for everything. But the reality is that like that's just not the way it is, especially when you start sprawling tens of thousands of tickets. The answer to that ticket may exist again on a website, maybe a Microsoft help article that you reference often. It may be within IT Glue, it may be within Hoodoo, it may be within CloudRadial, it may be on a handwritten sketch pad that you keep at your desk. Whoops. See, not great. But the point is like to be able to scale yourself and to have that be a part of the process, right? Because we'll talk about what it's for technicians, what it's for AI. For a technician, they have the fluidity to be able to go into the documentation to pull answers and see that. But that's time consuming, right? Just because it exists does not mean that it is easy to get to. And like what we tried to do inside of Service AI is to be able to connect documentation systems. So even in my case, I have mine hooked up to CloudRadial and I have even an internal documentation system. And in this case, I'll clarify even further. When we're discussing documentation, we're really hyper focused on documentation to feed answers, processes, and everything. So we really are talking more internal documentation with, depending on what you have connected, the option to make that client facing. But the purpose for documentation inside of Service AI is to enrich the AI, not so it just has to crawl tickets. But for example, if I say, how to create a course or whatever it may be, to be able to gather this information, take a look at it, get the steps, and know what to reply sensically and parse from and pull from to the end users and to the technician inside. So what we often see, right, and this is more of like the guts of Service AI, is that when we start to look at how an AI responds, right? Mike and I have done this. Every MSP I've worked with have done this. You start to be able to sandbox how a bot is answering this thing. So in this case, it is theoretically running through a request from a user saying, I'm trying to install the latest version. It's giving me an error code, whatever. And it gives kind of some generic tips. And you see this a lot with AI tools, including Service AI, because it's kind of grasping at straws. Now, the more it knows, the more it has documentation to pull from, right? The better it is. This is a poor example because it's a fake client. There's not a lot of stuff. But I think what happens a lot is you have the right source of information. You may, need to improve it, but you have it. The first step is how well can you connect it to a technician? And that's what we're seeing as well. So back to that service board example of a ticket, not just saying the related tickets, but also, hey, is it related to the Epson driver, right? Could that be an issue here? Could that be a play? Now, in this case, it recommended that because this conversation was the printer is not working, whatever. Had this person said the Epson printer is not working, that confidence interval would have shot up. So it's stuff that as I look through this and I talk through it, it's the same process a human being goes through, right? Just visualized and added numbers, right? If I am a human being going through this ticket and I'm trying to understand if this is a relevant piece of documentation, I mentally can quickly say like it's not an Epson one, so maybe not. And then if it starts to come up, we see that. So putting that up is a big deal, but I think the bigger value is filling in those gaps wholesale. So to be able to do something like this, right? So a lot of times we'll come in and we'll say, let's generate an actual article on this that talks about resolution codes for, in this case, I could even clarify that it's for Zoho accounting. using these past articles and not having the onus of creation of this and maintenance of this be on the technician to be able to use AI assistance at what it's good at. Because from my perspective, AI is pretty good at sorting large amounts of data and also generating content based off of sources of information, right? So if you pointed this specifically at, maybe their KB, it can crawl that, grab that, and specifically saying, hey, 304 is a corrupted installer file, giving specific error codes. And now when I add this in, right, I can add this to our KB. Depending on the system you have, maybe you can even add it to the client-facing one. And now having that be the entire process of generation, you can always go back and edit, of course, and work on it. But the point is that if I rerun the prompts, what you see overall as a net thing is both a measure of how your documentation stands today, and then a path forward to give more specific instructions, even down to like, if that doesn't work, set up a call. So it's an evolution that we see a lot of, from having no documentation, poor documentation, to structuring and working on it. And Mike, do you this isn't even a setup. I generally had the question. I forgot we were on a webinar, but do you have somebody dedicated to writing it, documentation, or is it just kind of like anybody who has the time? How does that usually work for you guys?
For a new customer, for an onboard, yes, there's somebody that is responsible for like I said, turning over all those rocks and taking all, getting all that documentation together and making sure that we've filled as much in our documentation platform as we possibly can.
Yeah.
But yeah, the rest of the time you rely on your techs, your engineers to be saying, and we've done some little things where we've sort of tweaked ConnectWise to make it work for us, but we put like a custom field in that just says this is KB content. And so that's kind of just as a checkbox that's telling an engineer when they go back through historical tickets that the answer might be in this ticket. But little things like that can just, I think, sometimes shortcut the route to getting the answers. But the bottom line is it's near impossible, I think, to manually, as a human being, go back through any volume of ticket data to look for the answers. And you're even relying on, the keyword being in the summary description. It might not be. It might be that the answer to the problem was a supplemental thing in a ticket about something else. And with the best will in the world, those might not get separated out. And then the summary adjusted to reflect the correct resolution. So it's near impossible in my experience to identify that, and the perfect ticket rarely exists. I'd be surprised if I find a ticket with a score of 10 in our ServiceAI instance, just because there's always things that can be done a bit differently with it. We did a workshop internally recently, which was our ticketing workshop, and we kind of came up with 15 things that we were trying to press home all the time and some of it's basics. Is the right agreement against the ticket? Have we triaged the ticket properly? Are we bundling when we should be merging? Are we merging when we should be bundling? It's about getting all these things right, but also about making sure that the summary line is descriptive. Who, where, what's the problem? Who is it affecting? What's the extent of that problem in the context?
Yeah.
Making sure that, even as you just demonstrated, actually, but as you are writing a response back, is that response in plain English? Is it avoiding acronyms and technical jargon? And all those things take time. Whereas that ServiceAI generated answer is literally a copy and paste that we can just tweak where we need to make sure. And that's where we can really bring the efficiencies in. We've got a book called The Rules of Engagement that all of our engineers have, and it's sort of a collection of behaviors, really, that we want them to deliver in their ticket responses. And it is things like use technical jargon at your peril. A picture paints 1,000 words. It's those sorts of things that help us to get across that plain English response. But doing all that stuff takes time. And then as a result of that, you've got a backlog of tickets, and then you've got engineers that are feeling pressured for their time to respond and their time to results. And so if you can just take some of that repetitiveness away, how many times a day does an engineer type how to add a signature to their Outlook? How many times a day do they type, here's how to clear your print queue, etc.? That stuff can just be generated on the fly with little tweaks. Then you really are saving time. Plus, you're also making sure that the content in your tickets is of a high enough quality to be useful both to humans in the future and to AI as it tries to do this job for us or alongside us.
Yeah, that's I think the exact thing that Mike just said about that is the approach to take to any AI tool that touches your service desk. It's to always assess it of, am I improving the tool for the tool's sake, or is this tool actually going to assist in making my service desk better, even if I stop paying for that tool tomorrow? And I think that's an important thing because again, who knows the future of AI, right? But we know that like there is no harm that will come from putting in better notes and having better documentation and having your thing. Because worst case scenario, you are onboarding and expediting the processes for your team. So the worst case scenario is you have a better time internally. The best case scenario is again that carrot on a stick I talked about of like, should you start to really like the thing, the response, right? Like Mike was saying, what happens realistically today is those tickets that are the 20-30% of whatever, right? Where it's just like, I don't know how to do X or Y issue is giving me trouble. And it's a very simple thing to be able to not have to look up again, how do you reset your password in whatever system or how do you clear an error message or whatever, and just take a look and paste it and have that confidence is the gap right now we're in until we have that become something that you're so confident with going, just answer that ticket for me, right? So that is the eventuality, but that training piece between is again supplemented by the quality of your notes, the discussions that you have around what the expectations are, again, training internal people and as a byproduct, the AI. And then also, again, auditing that, not taking stuff on blind faith, because again, AI is AI. It will try to offer a positive answer. It'll try to do many things. And that's why it's important to kind of use this as a platform to honestly and objectively measure the desk and figure out the state of stuff. One last thing on documentation, because this comes up all the time. CloudRadial as a vendor has this issue, and I know MSPs have this issue where when you start looking at the summary, it's not just about the technician, the desk, even down to like, for example, the article assessment. What's the quality of your articles, right? Because it doesn't matter to me that you have 50,000 articles. That's a cool number, but it could be that the article quality is terrible. They could just be links, they could be words, they could be, TIFF files, whatever it is. So it's not necessarily impressive to have a bunch. The importance is like, what's the grammar? What's the average age? Are they fresh? To be able to objectively measure that and consider that as you look at your own training or your own technicians suffering burnout because it takes them forever to get stuff done internally. So it's like it's trying to understand again that the service desk is not just here is an answer to a question, but really what's the friction I'm feeling internally and where's that friction coming from? So documentation plays a huge role in that. And that kind of leads me to the next thing. Mike, I don't know if you and I really talked about this at scale, even off the webinar, but one of the things that I run into a lot nowadays is I run into a lot of, there's an increase in root cause analysis stuff, which like purpose being that a lot of the MSPs I talk to include some form or fashion of the service desk metrics in like business review reports, or they have these discussions with their clients typically talking about CSAT and SLAs and maybe some stuff on like type, subtype, item, those kinds of reports, which have their value. But I think the idea was for us that to discover the hidden inefficiencies, one of the things that we're kind of, this is an open question, it's not really much of a lecture, is to be able to visualize and trend like what are the core things and even getting down to as we develop this further, what are they by customer, right? So if I go to a specific company inside of ServiceAI, and I want to know what's really bothering Miller Associates, can I pull together a list of their top issues? Can I pull together a list of their trouble tickets and what the patterns are? So discovering those in our mind is a way to not just keep the value of service AI and how fast can someone respond to a ticket, but even can you have a better conversation because you go, hey, this AI scraped 10,000 tickets. Did you know that you have 45% of your tickets are because of your crappy accounting software? Is that worth a conversation? Stuff like that. Um, which again, prior to this, did you have a way to do that yourself, Mike? I mean, is that a
Yeah, and
manual
I mean,
thing?
it's actually really it's one of our really strong use cases actually for this. But so prior to this, we'd really make use of the various sort of dashboards and visual reporting that lives in the CloudRadial portal as part
Hmm.
of our TBRs, as we call them with our partners. But what that relies on, obviously, is your issue type and subtype.
Yeah.
And also then relies on that being correct.
Yes.
But also specific. You just talked about, a crappy piece of accounting software, but for us, that might just be like third-party SaaS.
Yeah.
And so that's not really helpful when you start to talk on a per customer basis. And annoyingly, a large percentage of those issue types are the words must change. But again, which is just what you see sometimes when it's a
Yes.
quick win on a ticket. But when the AI is doing that job for you, it's reading the tickets. So actually, when that might be logged as an issue type of third-party SaaS, it's realizing that it is that piece of accounting software and attributing that to it. So yeah, certainly the data insights that we see now through ServiceAI, I guess, are just much more granular than what we were getting through what was a great representation already in the CloudRadial portal for us during those TBRs.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring it up just because like I've had this conversation more times than I can count, and I'll bring up something that is again, this is just truth. It's not I'm deviating from my own scripts, and my marketing people are probably like, "Nah." But when we talk about the CloudRadial portal, right? This is it. In case you haven't seen it, cool. But we talk a lot about that, to have those business reviews, and whether it's a TBR, QBR, whatever your BR is, part of the issue that we've had with a lot of MSPs is discussing how you bring up subjects in a non-technical way, in a consumable way, in a I used to work in advertising. They call it snackable content. You have little pieces that are easily digestible, so you can kind of keep the conversation moving. And like this is a demo tenant with a bunch of staged things, but to be able to have a conversation saying, how do you get to, I think we should migrate to the cloud? Like, yes, there's a lot of generic benefits, but I think what ends up happening is if you could literally say like, hey, we have a cloud migration project. I'll use compliance assessment or one of these as an example to be able to have this conversation, but to have that be powered by empirical truth going like, hey, this is because we're seeing this trend. We're seeing friction. We're seeing your users upset, whatever, is a different echelon of value over the SLAs or here's how many types and subtypes. And Mike's right. What we're discovering is that AI can do all kinds of hallucinations and funny stuff. But one of the things it is pretty good at is, again, being able to contextualize tickets and being able to say what the actual root cause, what the product was. So what you saw me flashing between on the screen quickly was to be able to synthesize that these 5 tickets are password issues or that there's hardware failures, right? It's not Dell, it's not Lenovo, it's not HP, it's Bing. You have hardware failures. To be able to take that kind of category to a client goes from a conversation of, hey, we might need 2 replacements to you have infrastructure things we might want to work on for XYZ reason. So it gets to be not so much just a tool that looks at the line of text, but really synthesizes and summarizes and really tries to understand what they face. So it's something that like, we try to do as like as a visual representation, but like, again, this is AI ticket, so forgive the fact that there's 2 words, but in a real one, you might see an actual trend of things. And the reports of here are only going to get better because I think that to be able to offer this kind of thing is a lot of value, again, strategically. It's not so much just for the desk. It's really a good conversation for more like account managing relationship thing to show that you have good insight on their stuff.
And I think as well, if I can just throw in there, but I think that value goes in both directions. So certainly, like you can run the risk of becoming quite siloed or blinkered by the tickets that you're dealing with and not actually appreciate that maybe this might be part of a bigger issue. So
Yeah.
when we actually look at that data and we say maybe, I don't know, 12, 13, 20% of tickets for this customer are performance related issues when they're using ABD infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, when we look at that wider picture, maybe there's a resourcing or a scaling issue at play here that is on us to remedy. But when we've just identified individual pocketed tickets about performance, we think, oh, there's too much running or there's something going on here, and we'll put a session host into drain mode. We'll do whatever we need to flush out those resources. But then when you look at the wider picture, it's actually on us to be proactive and say, these hosts, this virtual infrastructure just needs some more resourcing or some more scaling. And we can fix that before it becomes a bigger problem for the customer. But also then that helps us sometimes with how you train internal teams, because we can identify what is actually going on, what is actually breaking all the time. So how do we empower the engineers that we've got to be able to fix these things quicker? And look, we've we've well evolved beyond first line, second line types of roles in this business, and most of the service desks get exposure to everything that they possibly can. And that's how we can get really rapid response and resolution times. But that then means being able to focus certain technologies on certain people to be able to fix those problems quickly. But also then the third piece is to go to the customer and say, you know, you've got a lot of problems with this piece of software. Is it a training piece? Can we start to put more knowledge base articles into our CloudRadial portal, or deliver some training through there for the users so that they, again, are empowering themselves to sort of self-service and upskill? And we see it a lot with the university courses in the portal. You know, very often we'll look at tickets that come in and say, these are Word, Excel, it's those sorts of issues. There's courses available, pop yourself on them. You'll give yourself the knowledge to stop these things being a problem. And from a customer perspective, it's never the highlight of anyone's day to phone IT support. So if all of a sudden they can self-service and think, well, actually now I don't feel like an idiot when I've got a phone because I don't know how to do a pivot table or something like that. You know, they feel a bit more comfortable and confident in using the tools that they've got available to them. So that actual root cause data is, I think, hugely valuable to any MSP from both an internal and a customer-facing perspective.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that was honestly one of the visions that I think is good for the market to think about, because obviously we're doing it because we see the same thing. But what I'm noticing a lot more, especially as we look at the root cause stuff, is that not every issue is, again, necessarily a service. Well, and maybe in this case, but what I'm really going after is, like, even when I pulled up the dashboard and you see tickets to review, to be able to understand intent, or to have the AI get better at interpreting, like, well, if it's an Excel issue and they're just needing to learn Excel, like, there are a couple different ways to handle that, right? So I could either submit a response as a technician in here saying, I'm sorry, your Excel is not working. Here's how to restart it, right? Cool. But then there's a whole different echelon of service, like Mike's saying, where if you start trending that and you say they have a bunch of stuff, the program isn't bad, we just get a large volume, to be able to rope in different types of content to serve, right? It's not just, I fixed the thing, I've updated, I've bought you a new laptop, but to start saying, well, this is the 50th phishing ticket we've had. It's time for security training for you guys, right? Training ropes into this really nicely. You're right. And again, this is not necessarily to talk about CloudRadial, but to be able to correlate, like, you have this training available. This is more of a business reviewer discussion point, to be able to say a lot of these issues, these slowdowns, or however much you pay us, can actually be reduced if you could just train your own team, or we could share that responsibility. So we see that as well, that by visualizing what's actually, you know, kind of happening in the desk, you have more answers. There are more resolutions than ticket close, ticket close, ticket close, because there are things that you can do, right? Relationship issues with the client, relationship opportunities, sales opportunities, automation opportunities. There's so many things to figure out holistically when you look at those. But again, where AI excels is that, go analyze 30,000 tickets and tell me what the plaguing issues are and where you've sourced them. And that's a big one too. It's, where did you come up with that recommendation? So the fourth bit that I saved, but I think I'm seeing a lot of interest with, is also how you kind of view technicians. And this is something that is a contentious subject among especially service desk managers, because I think the elephant in the room is AI a tool to replace techs? Is AI a tool to only augment techs? Will AI only ever be a little bit of that? Is AI overbearing? Is it going to sit on every ticket and nag them? Like, what does it do and where does it really go? And how do we approach that as an industry, as people adopting a tool, right? So, like, I'll tell you where we start. The first thing that we start with is just being able to visualize, like, for example, the technicians you have out there, to be able to see, even using the same methodology and framework, the scoring of what's happening with them. So if I pop into, for example, Chris's, one of our technicians, and we take a look at what he's been working on, to be able to, again, objectively measure them the same way, to go, what is Chris's note-taking ability? What is Chris's average interaction like with his users? What this tells me is that Chris does a pretty good job. He may deal with people that are not always the happiest, and he could take better notes. But to be able to do that and synthesize that and be able to have an explanation, to be able to have reports that tell me exactly where and why those recommendations came from, is something that I know a lot of service desk managers either do manually or wish they could do in some faster method than just having to spot check tickets or sit with their techs and open them one by one. Have you run into much of agent performance stuff, actually, Mike? I know you
Yeah,
have
loads.
talked
And
about it.
we've done this long enough where we used to have service managers that would randomly pick 5, 10 tickets a week to listen to those recordings of the calls back and then compare that with the tickets. But it's so inefficient. You could pick 5 tickets out of 100 that you've done that week. That's 5%. It could be 2%, 3% of those tickets. And how do you know that the ones that you've picked are the right ones to be listening to? You just don't. And now to be able, one of the things that we look at as a business is sentiment analysis on tickets, and we use AI to look at sentiment analysis and in our phone calls, and that can make real world decisions based on what's happening right now. So if we've got a phone call where somebody is being aggressive or somebody is using language that might not be appropriate, that can trigger an immediate workflow to somebody else, or at least send a recording of that call for review afterwards, and then an account manager can have a conversation about it. But you could never do that across all calls, and
Right.
so those sorts of tools in measuring the performance of an agent are again hugely valuable if you want to build the best that you can with the people and the tools that you've got. And the same comes to this. Very often you can pick random tickets and just look at them and think what a great ticket that person has done. But you could pick the very next ticket they do, and it would be the worst example ever. It is literally issue resolved, ticket closed.
Yeah.
And then I'm shouting at a service manager, going, "Where was the testing on this ticket? Where was this? Is there anything else we can help you with? Where was the prompts to fill in a feedback survey or a thermometer test?" And you miss all those opportunities. So yeah, look, this I think is huge, and to be able to as well have those points in time where we can look at, well, what was the historical for this? Has their performance improved? Has it declined? What can they work on? And again, you have to measure it. So if it's giving recommendations there, and the engineer is putting those recommendations into practice, we should see an improvement month on month on what we're measuring.
That's exactly right. And back down to the performance reviews, right? Because people a lot of times they look at these scores, and I think the inclination is that you want these to be tens, because obviously like that's the human nature. And unfortunately, it's not really the purpose of it, but it's to understand how they could be better. And we want it to improve, certainly. But like it's not a crime or a problem to see this be a 6 or a 7 or whatever, 'cause some of these things are out of your control. So when we look at that, to your point, I've worked with several MSPs that they come back, they kind of get the understanding. Part of the session, we've done this before, a lot of MSPs I worked with have done this, is we'll go through and we'll check and see why the AI believes that Ricky is a 6 or an 8 or whatever. Give me examples. If we agree and we understand exactly why it arrived at that conclusion, going like, well, maybe it gave me a 6 because my notes are bad, but I'm a good technician. I am a good technician. Then the coaching opportunity says, well, go put in better notes so I know that. Because again, the AI is not some magic bot. It's interpreting it just the way a human being would, going, you may be the best technician ever, but all I have to go off of is fixed. I don't know. So that is also a measure that we like to see. So a lot of times what happens is we see the scores pop up, just like we're seeing now, and we have that moment. Remember, I talked loosely about like you have your analyze, you have your train and deploy. Those are really roughly the phases of what happens. And a lot of times the analysis gets people worried because they look at that and they go, oh boy, how far am I from a true no touch, all that stuff. And they look at the scores and again, they start thinking about where they go from there. How do we do it? So that's why even when we talk about these ranges, to be able to improve the scores here and to be able to say, okay, we've put a concentrated effort to put in better notes. I'm not going to have anything here, but if I do the last month, it's like, whoa, actually, we got worse, right? But to be able to see those efforts go up and down as times go on, and to be able to say, where are those tickets? What's happening? What's caused that to happen? Has something changed that there's a negative trend? Not only that these are some of the things you can see today, so you can start to get visualization, but also the things we plan to expand on, because I think this has the biggest value for service desk managers to understand the state of their interactions and their affairs and whatnot too. Like Mike said, if you're making an effort and you do want to improve your documentation, you do want to improve your technicians' performance, and you do have that assistance actually making it to them, then we get to the point where, again, that can be really, really transformational for the service desk. And one of the third things I didn't mention is even in that pod, as I have this answering the ticket, right? I think the lowest use case of Service AI is Chat GPT feeding you answers. It can do it, right? That's totally fine. But the power is in how you interpret the data and how you use it again to coach, to improve, to train the next person, to use it as a base of summary for logic and understanding the next thing, even down to the summary. I saw one of the questions. Let's do a couple minutes of Q&A here if we have a few minutes of time. But one of the questions that I saw pop up was, can the agents see their own scores? Not necessarily. Agents don't necessarily have to have access to ServiceAI itself, but even then, there's a system of permissions that when you actually add a tech, right, a person in here, you can say, hey, I want them to have, I'll just jump into Mike Chasen here, have limited access to certain modules. So for example, they couldn't see the other fellow technicians and stuff. But even on their own ticket, if you consider you've got maybe technicians that again are very smart, very good, but they could use coaching. One of the things we have and we plan on investing further is to give them a summary of what's happening, to give them coaching tips going like, hey, a little bit friendlier, a little bit more clear, the user seems confused, that type of stuff. To have that buddy on the pod is kind of a big understanding that we want to help, again, make this process easier, smoother, and make this reliable. So long story short is the agent stuff is more complex than just did they put a good note in. It's again, how do you improve them? How do you measure that? How do you go back and double check it and so on and so forth. You down for all of 3 minutes of Q&A, Mike? You want to see if you have anything anything to feed off of? What's the best way? Crystal, who is behind the scenes in our invisible gal, do you want to read them out or should I dive in?
I can definitely read them to you.
Let's go for that.
Okay, so the first one was, does this integrate with Kaseya BMS?
Yes, it does. So we can pull Kaseya stuff in there and parse the tickets. The nice thing about this, I'll say this for the tickets that we integrate with today, it's really a simple model. So basically the same thing that the portal can support, we support, because as long as we can get the tickets in, it's different than, I don't know if you're a CloudRadial customer or the portal customer. With CloudRadial's portal, we basically ask to see the tickets and we take a look and then we go, cool, here it is. With this, we're actually basically downloading them so we can parse them. And that's the only way we can make this thing work faster. So yes, we can grab your tickets, basically keep them in a database to yourself and use that just like anything else. And it works equally fast across every PSA. There's no disparate performance across this stuff, which is a little different than a lot of other pieces of software that we've run. Long answer, sorry.
It's okay. That's a good answer. Okay, can the agent see a summary of items to improve if we give them access?
A summary of items to improve, like see their own stuff? Yeah. So when we look at an individual agent, I'm not sure if we have it nuanced down to their own thing, although we can talk about that. Again, at this stage, we can add features like every day, but they can see their own coaching thing. One of the things that has already come up in these discussions is that like the AI does an estimation. It goes like, here's where you generally should be. That prompt of how it's arriving at a lot of these suggestions is coming from CloudRadial, the vendor. But we see no reason to hide that. So I think what we're one of the things that we've talked about, that we're talking about this week actually, is having your own kind of service desk defining prompts yourself. Like obviously we'll come up with the standard ones, you can riff off of it. But to be able to say, I really want to emphasize warmth in my responses because that's kind of our white glove service or whatever it may be. So to be able to not just frame this off of like our 5 points of communication or whatever it is, communication, escalation, how you're doing in this thing, but to be able to allow you to inject your own estimation is something we're looking into as well. So long story short is, yes, they can get in there. Yes, it has specific coaching for their own self, but it's kind of phrased, you can see it, where it's talking to a service desk manager about the user. We don't have it where it's like the individual person can get their coaching short of within the pod itself, in which case it will tell them, it'll coach them through that specific ticket. That's the relationship right now. The service desk manager gets oversight, tech kind of gets their own time and point one.
Okay, awesome. Okay, one more here. So you'd mentioned that it integrates with document. Well, the question is, does it integrate with documentation platforms like IT Glue and Hoodoo?
Yes to both. And those are actually really interesting ones. I don't want to get too nerdy with it, but with IT Glue and Hoodoo, they both have documents that you can create for specific companies. And it's smart enough that when, say, a technician is working on a ticket in a ticket inside of the pod, what it's going to do is it's going to be able to reference down to the containers. So it goes, I have the general knowledge, I'm allowed to pull from that. I have IT Glue knowledge about, in this case, Azure Diff Technology, reference all that. If I go to the next client, that documentation is forgotten. So that documentation not only works, it's really well containerized, so you're not bleeding information from one area to the other. So yes to both of those. In fact, I'll show it too, because a lot of people say, is that true? Do you have that? Let me see if I can pull up a documentation system. I may not be able to. Yes, I can. Articles. I have IT Glue available as one of the ones. A lot of people do IT Glue and other ones. In my case, I've got this article system as CloudRadial. But yes, Hoodoo is available in the exact same way as IT Glue is. Good question. Mike, I can't remember. Do you keep yours mostly in a specific area? What's your primary documentation source?
Yeah, so for us, it's IT Glue.
Yeah, IT Glue as well. It's a common one,
Yeah.
obviously.
Mm.
All right, Crystal, what was that? Sorry.
No, I think that's all. There are a few coming in about just different things, and I do appreciate all the help in the chat, by the way. Thank you for the team there. But I think that's all for now.
I saw one last one come in from Carrie. I'll get you on the buzzer beater,
Oh.
Carrie, because I saw Carrie, and then I was like, "Can I IT Glue?" And it's like, "Okay, bye. See you, Carrie." No. What was the question here? Let's see. Can IT Glue articles be exclude the password data? No, actually, funny you ask. Even in our documentation, we have that little checkbox that says include password data. I don't know why, but the article content won't come through unless we have that checkbox. That's like an API quirk. We don't care. In fact, I don't think I have anything that proves it in here. Mike has seen it. Every MSP that works with us has seen it. But one of the nice things about this tool is that we have a pretty robust security policy that scrubs information. So there we go. You can see an example here. So down to the password information, passwords, emails, any kind of identifying PII automatically gets scrubbed and trained as redacted. So we don't train on any of that information. So I know it's uncomfortable. Again, I also was like, do we have to get the password checkbox in IT Glue? That does not mean we're getting all your passwords pulled through. But what we're doing is we're basically trying to train the AI on appropriate generic data, not call Mike's phone number at boom, or here is Ricky's home address, because it will do that ordinarily. So yes, we do, but we also do our very best to, at whatever we learn, we try to scrub out any of that PI to make sure that even if you accidentally give us access to something a little bit proprietary, it's to a company. We don't train on it. We try to limit the exposure to the very bare minimum of if anything's even useful in it. Well, there you go. Mike, I want to say thank you for joining us. I know we're out of time and we're a little bit over, but I really appreciate you, especially offering the genuine insights and someone who's tried it. And I appreciate getting feedback on where it's going to go.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. It's been great.
And one last note, I guess, before we really go, which is just a quick snippet of like, I think the last takeaway I will give for you guys is to be realistic about where AI is today, and kind of that forward thinking thing is just a quick note of, a lot of times people look at tools like this and they wonder if they need to be fully invested, if it's time to jump in, if it's time not to. I think now is a good time to be aware of tools and how they're approaching stuff, and hopping on the early adopter bandwagon can be cool. And I think it's obviously really cool for both of us, but just be realistic of what you want out of it and measuring what it can do versus what promises of what it can do, right? What's really useful to you today. And again, Mike and I have talked about, like, one of the reasons Mike's a great partner is because not only is he realistic, but it's also hopeful for the future of like what it will be able to do and where it really helps. So it's not just a plug for ServiceAI, but it's about approaching AI in general, which is, if you're interested in doing so and you again want to get a demo or exploring another tool, just be very, very grounded with yourself and knowing what AI is capable of today, again, versus where it's going to go tomorrow. That's my spiel. I'm out. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you, and I will see you for the next implementation of ServiceAI.
Cheers, Ricky. Thanks.
Bye, guys.